Hello students, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to discuss the chapter number 9, Dear Mrs. Naidu. A. Complete the flow chart. Number 1. Why am I writing this? Answer. It's a homework assignment. Number 2. Why did I choose you? Answer. Because I am reading a book about your life and it fascinates me. Number 3. What do I want to say? Answer. I want to introduce myself and explain why I choose to write to you. Number 4. How do I feel after writing? Answer. My brain and heart feel exactly the same as when I started. B. Complete these sentences. Number 1. When I read this chapter, it reminds me of my own life and emotions. Number 2. I know how the character feels because I am going through similar emotions. Number 3. The setting of this chapter reminds me of my own home and school. Number 4. I had a similar experience of standing up to adults like Mrs. Naidu did. C. Answer these questions briefly. Number 1. Any miss wanted students to grow their brains and hearts. What did any miss mean by that? Answer. Any miss meant that she wants students to think critically and develop emotionally. Number 2. What did a growing hurt means according to the narrator? Answer. A growing hurt means developing emotions and empathy. Number 3. What instance did Sarojini give about Mrs. Naidu standing up to her parents? Answer. Mrs. Naidu stood up to her parents by locking herself in a room when they wanted her to speak English instead of Bengali. Number 4. Mention 3 differences between Sarojini and Mrs. Naidu from the story. Answer. 3 differences between Sarojini and Mrs. Naidu are: age. Mrs. Naidu is no longer alive. Achievements. Mrs. Naidu wrote a long poem and topped her exams. Number 3. Background. Mrs. Naidu came from a big house with many rooms, while Sarojini lives in a small house with one room. Question number 5. Why does the narrator feel that Mrs. Naidu understands kids like her? Answer. The narrator feels Mrs. Naidu would understand kids like her because Mrs. Naidu stood up to adults and fought for what she believed in. D part. Discuss these questions and write their answers. Number 1. Why does the narrator possibly feel her brain and heart to be exactly the same at the end? Answer. The narrator possibly feels her brain and heart are the same because she hasn't learned anything new or developed emotionally through writing the letter. Number 2. The narrator compares herself to Mrs. Naidu throughout the story. Do you think comparing yourself to the others is a good practice? Give reasons. Answer. Comparing oneself to others can be both good and bad. It can inspire, motivate, but also lead to feelings of inadequacy, and low self-esteem. Number 3. What do you think about the narrator's approval of Mrs. Naidu's act of locking herself in a room after a disagreement with her parents? Give reasons. Answer. The narrator's approval of Mrs. Naidu act to locking herself in a room shows that she values standing up for oneself and expressing one's opinions, even if it means disagreeing with adults. However, this act can also be seen as disobedient and rebellious. Thanks for watching.